I will have to say part of my journey, I feel like it was a calling. And I know because there's this time period of, I honestly don't know how I got called to this. I can see the big picture now. And I look back and I go, oh, God was just weaving all of this together. I did yoga teacher training through Holy Yoga. It was all online. At the end of the training, you do a week-long training in Arizona in person. It was just like a throwback to my childhood. Like everything, I was a very athletic child.
Mm.
And it was my love for Christ. It was being around community, and it was the physical aspect of being with people while they were healing. And I was like, this is amazing. I didn't even know there was a world like this out there.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Heal with Beth Jones. That's me, your host. My mission is to bring the power of healing to trauma and abuse survivors. That's why every guest on this show will bring you an amazing story of healing in action. So come on, everyone, let's heal. Have you ever wondered why your body hurts in certain places, even when doctors can't find anything physically wrong? Why does your left hip feel tight? Why does your throat close up when you try to speak your truth? Why does your chest feel heavy, even on a good day? What if I told you that your body is literally holding your story and it's trying to tell you something? Welcome back to Let's Heal with Beth Jones. I'm Beth, the healing mentor. And today we're diving deep into something that absolutely fascinated me, where trauma actually lives in your body and how to release it. My guest today is Cynthia Newton, and she is one of those beautiful pain to purpose people. Cynthia went from being a corporate paralegal to becoming a therapeutic body worker who specializes in helping people release stored trauma from their bodies. And when I say she knows where trauma hides, I mean she can literally feel it in your tissue. In this conversation, Cynthia breaks down where emotional trauma gets stuck: the left hip, the throat, the heart, the diaphragm, and more importantly, why it goes there and what we can do about it. We also talk about something I think a lot of us don't understand, that emotions like anger and grief aren't negative feelings. They're actually messengers trying to protect us and guide us. I also share one of my breakthrough moments from my healing journey, a story I held in shame for years until my body literally released it through somatic movement therapy. It was like a champagne bottle finally popping, and what came out opened me up for my healing journey. If you've been on your healing journey for a while, or if you're just starting to realize that what you're carrying emotionally is showing up physically, this episode is for you. Cynthia and I get real about the hard parts too, like what happens to your relationships when you heal and others don't. So get comfortable and let's heal together. Here's my conversation with Cynthia Newton. I'm excited today to have with me a new friend. Her name is Cynthia Newton. Cynthia, welcome to the show.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. Thanks,
Good.
Beth, for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. All right, why don't we get started? Would you please just tell the audience whatever it is that you would like them to know about you?
Oh, sure. My name is Cynthia. I am a therapeutic body worker. That's what I do for a living. But personally, I am a Jesus lover. I'm a wife. I'm a mom. I am a mom of 5, 2 kids of my own, 3 bonus kids. I'm a lover of all things water, outdoors, adventure, and I'm a learner. I love everything knowledge and learning and things like that.
And you are also what I would refer to as one of those pain to purpose people who've had your own journey which we might touch on just a little bit, but that's led you into the body work that you do today, which is really about
Yeah.
helping people to heal.
Yes. I've
Yeah.
had a life. I try not to focus on a lot of that, but I like to focus on the purpose part. But yes, I have had a journey in my life. Love to share with people so that if my journey can help someone else along the way, I love to share that. Yes.
Yeah. That's what we're going to talk about today is that
Yeah.
journey, what that's looked like for you and where you are now. Yeah, you're my kind of people, right? Let's have some stuff in the past that was painful, challenging, maybe still a little bit painful and challenging today, but do our work to heal and go on and find joy in our life and then be able to share that with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, which I love these stories. So I'm very delighted that you're here today to talk about it.
Yes. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Let's do the part that might be a little bumpy first. And
Okay.
this is your opportunity to say as little or as much as you would like to about the past and the things that led you to the place where you knew you needed to do something different and go on that healing journey.
Yeah, I think for me, the healing journey was almost forced on me. I think sometimes I say that for those who have been through 12 step or looking at 12 step, it's almost as if I got to a place where I could no longer cope. So
Mm.
that's why I say it was forced. Maybe not forced, that's a pretty strong word, but it was my life had become uncontrollable, had become out of control because of past things that had happened in my life and choices that I had made along the way. Yeah, I had gotten to a place where I felt personally out of control. I felt my life was spinning. I was married to my past husband, my ex husband, and life was just completely out of control. I didn't know who I was anymore. I had pain throughout my body. I was sick. I was tired. Our marriage was falling apart. And it was really, when I say forced, it was me thinking that I needed to fix him and having him go someplace and then we would all be okay. And in reality, in him taking those steps, I went to recovery and therapy and realized the things that were really affecting me as well.
Yeah, it's that inward journey where we really
Yeah.
make the progress once we realize it's us. It's not anybody else, it's us. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's common, the healing journey for all of us, no matter what your past suffering is, the trauma and the abuse that you've been through. As I talk to more and more people, we all universally come to that point where we just don't want to live like that anymore. And you say you're using the word forced upon you, which is a different way of saying that place that we all come to where it's the pivot point, whether it's you feel like it's forced on you as you described it, or it's the rock bottom that I hear a lot of people refer to it as. But regardless of your perception of what that was in your life and how you describe that for yourself, I hear this over and over again. And it's like a universal theme for those of us who take that journey is that we get to that place where we're like, enough. And the
Yeah.
pivot is to start turning toward the journey. Do you recall, was there a moment, like an inflection point, when that happened and you took a step in a different direction?
There, I read stories like that where people are like,
Mm-hmm.
this is the point. I feel like mine was so blended. So there were a few points when I look back that I remember. The first was when my marriage was pretty rocky. My past marriage was pretty rocky. And I was invited by a fellow person in my recovery group to go to a yoga class. And she was the owner of the yoga studio. She was teaching the yoga class. And I went, it was considered a restorative yoga at that time. So, for those maybe listening that don't know what restorative yoga is, your body's more on the ground, you're in calming poses, you're in those poses for a longer held period of time. And I remember getting into a pose and my body, I just started crying. And I didn't remember, I had no, at that point, I didn't really have an awareness of why I would be crying. And I would look up at her and I would look at her like, why am I crying? What is this? And she just would have this lovely response of, it's okay. Just let it be. You're fine. And I kept going back. And I think by about the third or fourth time was my aha moment of realizing what was going on in the outside world in my life was actually starting to show up in my body. And it was the first connection for me that this life that I had either been through in the past and was currently going through was starting to really affect me health wise. And that was the first aha. I also remember just being on the couch and being so tired that I couldn't function. I had a little, like 6-month-old child at the time, and I was having to take 2 to 3 hour naps in the afternoon. And I remember thinking, this isn't how I'm supposed to live. This isn't how life should be. We're supposed to live it abundantly and fully. We might have seasons, but this was not living to the fullest. And I couldn't figure out why my body, I felt, was giving up on me, or, and I look back now and know it was actually protecting me. It was doing what it was supposed to do to protect me, but I didn't feel like it at the time. I didn't know that. And then the third thing, was really hard when my ex-husband stepped into recovery and then he asked me to go to recovery. I thought he was crazy. I was like, there's no way. This is a you problem. It's not a me problem. And those who've
Yeah.
been through recovery realize it's all of us together. And I remember, having that hard thing of having to step into the 12-step recovery room for the first time, and how hard that was because of my ego and my pride. But yet the women in that room were so loving and caring. And by the end of the night, I was like, oh, wow, this is really where I was supposed to be. Yeah. So those three, they were at different times, but they were like I look back now and realize they were the big catalysts of change, right?
They were at different times, but were they within a progression within a year or?
They were probably within 2 or 3 years of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, within the first 2, 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I talk about the inflection point for me, the pivot point for me being a hypnotherapy session that I had a little over 5 years ago now. But I realize as I've looked back on my journey, there were points prior to that where my body was doing things to heal and preparing to really do the deep work that I was going to do. And one of those actually was a somatic movement therapy session that I had gone to, and I'd worked with this woman. I'd been to see her, I don't know, probably the 3 times before.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't getting anything from the sessions. And part of me was like frustrated because nothing really seemed to be working with that. And she was about the connection of mind, body, and soul and moving the body to push trauma out. And I didn't realize that's what I was doing at the time, but I had this desire to be in the sessions, and I connected with her and to be with her. And even though that I was frustrated because I didn't understand what was happening, like, why am I even here? I had that question. My inner knowing, I suppose, my body, God was saying to me, you need this, you need to be here. And I think it was the fourth or the fifth session. She was playing some music, and I think it was just the tone and the frequency of the music and the way that she was having my body move, that similar to what happened to you in the yoga that you're describing. I just started to cry like violently and just uncontrollably, and like literally this emotion just pouring out of me. And that probably went on for 5 or 6 minutes. And then after that, I was able to tell her a story for the very first time about one of my dogs who had been viciously and savagely attacked and killed. It was tragic. But I felt so much shame and guilt. And actually, that had happened probably 3 years before, 3 or 4 years, I guess 4 years before the somatic movement therapy work. But I had felt so much shame and guilt around her death that I would not tell anybody. So the only people who knew were me, my now ex-husband, the woman who owned the dog who killed my dog, and then the vet staff at the clinic. And
Oh,
everybody else, I just glossed over what had happened to Steele, God rest her soul, because I just carried so much guilt and shame. And I tell people now when I look back, it was like that was like a champagne bottle, all of my
uh-huh.
emotion inside of me from years of just storing it, unprocessed emotion. And this was like the cork. Her death was like the cork on that bottle. And that movement that day just shot it out of me. And so out came the emotion, a lot of really raw emotion. And then out came the story. I was able to tell it and say, I'm cold chills all over my body thinking about it now. But to say that story for the first time,
Yes.
and that was at least 2 years before what I refer to as my pivot point. And so I think that's not uncommon what you're describing and what I'm describing, to have that journey where the universe is working with you and starting to do the early healing work that we really then can say, oh, okay, I see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting that it was a whole 2 years before. That's before your pivot. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think that's just maybe just the circumstances. I know the woman who is my trauma therapist, who I found again immediately after I had the hypnotherapy session. I had met her a couple of years before the somatic movement therapy. And it was in one of those times where I was like, I need help. I know I do. I had no idea why. I went to therapy for 25 or 30 years before I actually got into trauma therapy. I had no idea why I was going, but like I just
Uh-huh.
had this need to be in therapy, right? So I'm going. And this was one of those attempts again to get help. And I'd met Monica early on and we'd connected and had a rapport, but as life does when we are trying to find our way to the path, I just stopped seeing her. Like it just didn't work out. And in the intervening 4 years, she went and completed her PhD to where she was fully licensed and trained and had a practice where she was focusing on trauma survivors. And so she like had to prepare herself. And so she was still in that period of doing her own work to be able to really help me move along in the healing journey. So I think it's things like that of why it just wasn't the time to go fully into it. But that release process had begun with that
Yeah.
somatic movement therapy. Yours being a year, maybe more. I think that just happens to us in the varying ways that the healing journey
Yeah.
moves. And I had become very bound and rigid. So I think there was more
Oh,
movement in my body that I needed to be able to continue to heal that probably took me those 2 years to
yeah.
still feel that.
Oh, I would say that was almost 25 years ago. And I would say
Mm,
my body, there's layers, right, of healing and going through. And I would say I probably didn't fully get to the body part up until the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years. Yeah. I think there's different parts of healing, maybe knowledge healing, heart healing, but true releasing from the body's been the last, maybe started in 2016, but yeah, it was definitely a process over time. As they say in recovery, peeling the onion, right? A little bit would get
mm-hmm.
peeled. And then I'd be content for a little while. And then the body would start to show up and something else would need to become peeled again. And yeah, over time.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing that you're talking about too, is that it can take time. So for me, when I realized that I had a whole lot of stuff I needed to heal from, it's like I'm not living this way anymore. And it was a conscious decision for me once I realized it. And there was a process of gathering a lot of knowledge, rapid knowledge gathering.
Yes.
But once I could see myself as a survivor and I could explain a lot of things about where I was stuck,
Mhm.
why I was stuck, and why I felt a lot of loneliness and aloneness in my life, even though I had what people would consider to be a very full and active life, I could start to see that because of the knowledge that I was gaining. I could identify myself as a survivor and then begin to look at what is it that I needed to, what have I experienced, what happened to you, which is I've just finished the Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Perry's. I've been listening to it on audio and like now reading the book again. So it's very much in my mind because that's how I talk about it myself. What happened to you? And I
Mhm.
was getting that knowledge. And once I
knew, I was like, oh, I get it. There's all kind of stuff in me because of what I
Yeah.
survived that I need to deal with. And
Mhm.
it was a conscious decision for me at that point in time, which I was laser focused on. I'm doing whatever it takes to heal. And I really spent 2 years deeply focused on that, which a lot of that took me into that inner work that we've talked about.
Yes,
I
yes,
touched on. We're going to come back to that, but
yes.
your I want to talk about your discoveries, like getting to that point and then what you discovered through that process. But that same, you look around at the people who've hurt you, and my
Mhm.
experience is you identify them, but then
Mhm.
you focus on yourself, you heal yourself, and that then
Yeah.
allows, at least for me, the letting go of the pain that those relationships caused me. It's not
Yeah.
really healing them in different ways, but yes, mine was a little bit shorter period of time on that intentional and focused part. So tell me about your inner journey. You've mentioned that you realize that you're going to recovery. He's asking you to go to recovery, and you initially think that's why you're going is ex-husband. Maybe there's some other things there that you'd experienced that sort of went into the them. They did this, or it's
Mhm.
their problem, right? Whatever
Mhm.
it may be. So just talk a little bit more about that experience of coming around to yourself and what that's looked like.
Yeah, so I started a form of codependent recovery, and I was in that 12-step group for 8 or 9 years. And that was a deep dive into my family history, how I became codependent, which is interesting. It's a term I don't truly use now because I think there are times in our life we can become codependent because of who we're with in those situations, whether family, spouses, around people who have addictions, etc. I, but anyway, it's not. So I spent about 9 years in there and learned a lot about myself, how I respond to people, how I avoid things, how I avoid conversations or conflict. I spent a whole lot of therapy learning about myself, which was really good, how I had absolutely no idea what feelings were. I remember one of the best therapists I ever went to was like, let's talk about anger. And I was like, ooh, let's not, right? Not even knowing about what anger felt like in my body, right? What was anger? What's the purpose of anger? Why is anger designed? What is it there for? We went through all the feelings. That was probably one of the best things I've ever done in my entire life is understanding what feelings are, what they feel like in our body, and what their purposes actually are. They actually serve a purpose for us. So I spent a deep dive into that. Then I probably took a pause. I dated, I got remarried, just enjoyed life. And then as we heal in relationships actually grow us. So in my new relationship, all new things surfaced and was back on another journey as well. My physical body started having some more health issues, and so I did was doing another deep dive after going through a pause. I would say I was always learning, but then I did another deep dive into more of how our body works, where pain comes from, why are we having inflammation, and that was the deep dive I've been into more lately in the last 10 years, 10, 12 years on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the codependent
Yeah.
part because you said
Yeah.
something there that I find interesting. And I've been thinking actually quite a lot about this myself recently, and that is becoming codependent in a relationship, even though you are not a codependent person. And I think I'm
I believe that.
the same. I believe that
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
that we take that on.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When I was listening to a lady, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, but she was describing how when there's one person in the relationship that is not fulfilling their role, we can become codependent as we try to overcompensate and fill that role. And it can become a child parent relationship. It can become a coworker kind of boss relationship if you're at work, as well as a spouse relationship. Yeah, depending on what's going on. And I thought it was a really great explanation of that, that I might not be codependent my entire life, but I might have tendencies where I take that on depending on a person whom I'm around or the relationship that I'm in.
I love it that you mentioned parent, child, and the coworker relationship, because we always think about it in when the partnering or the intimate relationship, spouse, whoever it may be. I think it's natural for us to think about codependency there. But
yeah, I think it
when you
was
said that, I was just wondering. I don't know that I've experienced it from a work standpoint, but I think if I thought about it in terms of my family, I know I've taken on roles in my family unit that weren't mine to carry. In fact, I've been working on some family constellation work recently to try to realign that and get myself back energetically in my spot in the family, and to get rid of those roles that I took on. And that arguably, I think, probably do put us in that place of being codependent. And then certainly in my marriage previously, there was a whole lot that I did that I shouldn't have been doing. There was a lot of compensating for vulnerabilities and just inability to share in the relationship. I carried a whole lot more than I should have. But I know myself to not be, I'm not codependent, because I look at myself in other relationships and I know that I'm not. But in that one, man, I was. So I think you're right. We can take on those roles.
Different places.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then you mentioned, which I found interesting, I want to just ask you about this, feelings. And we have feelings for a reason. They're there. So talk a little bit more about that, because I've never heard anybody describe it like that. And so I'm intrigued by that. So they're there for a purpose, like protect us. So talk about that.
So on a body perspective, and also from my spiritual perspective, right? I see the world from a biblical worldview. So I believe that God created them for a reason. So let's take anger, for example. Anger is there. When we have anger, if we start to notice when we get angry, sometimes anger is there to teach us that a boundary has been crossed, or something has wronged us, or that something is wrong, like globally in the world, right? We get angry about something globally in the world, or something that has happened between two people, that a boundary has been crossed. So it's my body's way of letting me know that is wrong, right? Now, what we do with that anger is different, right? We shouldn't act out against someone with anger. How we act in that anger is what we have to look out for. But to acknowledge the feeling in our body and know what that feels like, and then to be able to help that anger actually move through and not get stuck in us, that's what I would say is our job to deal with in our body. And then it can also help us, like, I don't know if you've ever been around someone and you're like, why am I so angry? And as we start to realize, we can be like, oh, something really crossed my boundary. That's not right. And then we can start to really realize where that's showing up. Sadness and grief is there to show us that we really loved someone well, right? Or that something that we had is now gone, especially when we lose a loved one. Grief is really there to show us that person was really important to us. That relationship was there and special. That what we've had is lost. That's what it's there to teach us.
Yeah.
I think people think of some of these feelings as bad feelings, or they think of them as positive or negative feelings. But I believe that they're all just feelings that are there. I don't believe that we have negative feelings. I believe that I don't think grief or anger are negative or bad feelings. I think they're there for a reason, and they're there for a purpose.
Yeah, I love the way you describe that. So it's just knowledge for the body, knowledge for the being. And you're right. It's what we do with those feelings and how we respond or react to them. That's the part that we have to watch out for a little bit. Make sure we're not causing a ripple effect with how we're feeling and I think about them as the lower level vibrational frequency in our body of what people sometimes might refer to as the negative, quote unquote, those fear-based emotions, or the lower level emotions, versus the ones that are when we're in our higher vibration on the left side of our emotions. But I love the way you talk about that, and your point about they're not good or bad, right or wrong. They're just feelings that we're experiencing, and there's a purpose, a reason for them, and taking the time to understand why we're having the feelings, particularly when they are in that lower vibration frequency section or those fear-based emotions, helps us to then be able to identify what is it in the past or what has just happened that's causing those to come up that we can now deal with and process out.
And I definitely agree with the frequencies of them. And that's one of the things that's so important, to bring awareness to those feelings, right? That anger, which has been proven scientifically to have a lower frequency, and fear has a lower frequency than joy and happiness, right? Which is why we don't want them to actually get stuck in the body or maintain or manifest there, right? So that's why when we can notice what comes up and let it move through and bring awareness to its purpose, and it moves through, however we do that body wise, then those frequencies of those emotions don't get stuck in us. And what I would think of is consider bringing dysfunctional movement patterns or dysfunctional disease or whatever ends up happening when they get stuck in the body.
And ultimately, that's what I think we're doing on our healing journey, is releasing those emotions and not allowing them to be stuck inside of us. And we'll come around to the physical aspects of that, because it's been your journey the last 10 years. And I think your progression is very interesting, the way that it's gone. It seems very almost like it's been training you, because it has been training you, right, to do what you do now.
It has definitely been training me. Yes.
Yeah. That's I heard a phrase not too long ago that my life is my laboratory. And that's my experience as well. It's the same as yours. I've had to experience all this myself to be able to give it to other people. Yeah. But that the emotions getting stuck, that process of moving them out, I think we've talked about already. And what this conversation is highlighting is that there's that point in time when you first really recognize those emotions are in the body. And I think that's the pivot point that a lot of us go through, whether it's immediate, an event, or a little bit of an extended period of time, which is your case. But realizing that, and you feel it, you become aware that you're feeling like heavy, is how I would describe it, and weighted. And then there's the process of beginning to excavate, why do I have this heaviness? Why do I have those emotions? Why am I feeling this way? That's the knowledge part, right? And then you start looking inward to go, oh, okay, my behavior might be contributing to this. I do that. But a lot of then that knowledge and gathering that is giving the identifier and the respect to what we've endured in our life and what we're carrying that ultimately needs to come out. That process evolves into, okay, now I'm going to get it out. And there is a physical, I mean, there's the therapeutic aspect of that for many of us. And then there's a physical aspect of getting that out. And so let's talk about that with you and your journey of releasing from your body, how that started and what you've been doing and how that's going now.
Okay, so how you want me to talk? So explain. You want me to talk about
physical? Let's talk about the physical, the focus on your body, right? And moving those emotions out. So when that started and what that path and that journey has looked like. Because let's talk about your personal experience in your laboratory as you've been learning to now be able to serve your clients.
Okay, on the physical level and how that I would say it first started with that, just the awareness, right? Always starts with the awareness that what emotions actually were. That was a big aha for me. And then I went through some years of therapy of talking about what was in the conscious. So going through, giving different stories to those feelings that were in the conscious level. I will have to say, part of my journey, I feel like it was a calling. And I know, because there's this time period of, I honestly don't know how I got called to this. I can see the big picture now, and I look back and I go, oh, God was just weaving all of this together.
That's your answer.
My God, your higher spirit, whatever you want. But for me, God was weaving it all together. And it was so interesting that I can look back now. But I got remarried in 2016. I went to a holy yoga. I did holy yoga teacher training for
What is
yoga.
that? I've never heard that. Holy
So
yoga.
holy yoga is there's, if you wanted to go be a yoga teacher, you can go get a 200-hour teacher trainer from different places. And I looked online and found one that was called Holy Yoga. So it's a Christian based yoga teacher training. I did it. I basically went to my current husband now, who's wonderful and supportive. I was a paralegal at the time, and I said, I want to quit my job. And he was like, I wanted to be home with our 4 kids that were in high school now that we were married and combined family. And he was like, okay. And then I said, by the way, I want to go back and be a holy yoga teacher. And he was like, okay. And I was just floored. I was like, we don't need to have a longer conversation about this. And he was like, no, okay. I jumped right in and I did yoga teacher training through Holy Yoga. And in that training, at the end of the training, it was all online, 2016. At the end of the training, you do a week-long training in Arizona in person. And in person, it was just like a throwback to my childhood. Like everything, I was a very athletic child.
Mm.
And it was my love for Christ. It was being around community, and it was the physical aspect of being with people while they were healing. And I was like, this is amazing. I didn't even know there was a world like this out there. And in it, I learned about yoga therapy. And while I was there that week, and yoga therapy was basically working one on one with people to do yoga and help them with their pain, but in a way that's yoga. So if you had a back pain, but you wanted to go to a yoga class, but you couldn't really work through it because of your back pain, you could go to a yoga therapist and they would help
Mm.
you one on one. Okay. So from there, I dove into yoga therapy and I did
Hmm.
yoga therapy. And then I began working with clients one on one, and the world just kept getting bigger and bigger. And I was like, there's muscle testing, there's all these things that I can do. It was like nonstop. And it was like my childhood of who I was as a child, and this world just came together. And I became what's called a neurokinetic therapist. So we use muscle testing to repattern dysfunctional movement patterns in people. But I was still a yoga therapist, so I was doing this together. And my mentor was like, you need to go back to massage school. He was like, you are not supposed to be touching people, working with them hands on, like modality hands on in the state of Texas. And I was like, no, I'll be fine. Because I was just working with people here and there, more of a hobby. And he kept going, you need to go back to massage school. You need to go. And I was like, no, I don't want to. I went to massage school. I finally went back to massage school. And that's where I would say the physical part of releasing really started. And I could see where God just started really putting all of it together. I went to a school here in the North Dallas area called Kikino Massage School, which is amazing. And they're more of an Eastern philosophy. And I went through massage school and then have been training almost weekly with the owner and a few other people there, learning his techniques. And I got a lot of that's where I got the introduction to really like the somatic work, where I was releasing in my body, really understanding how that anger and fear were showing up in my body, and just got work after work done, training after training, really learning where that was showing up in the body. And that's where I'm working today. That kind of was like that culmination of all of it together. It was really interesting. It's been fun.
So, what's the difference between the yoga work that you were doing and the somatic work that you're doing now?
Okay, so as a yoga class or yoga therapist?
The therapy work.
Yoga therapy was definitely, as a yoga therapist, it would be hands off. And it would be, I'm coming in for, let's say, back pain. I would know the muscles that were there that would be for back pain. And I would give you yoga poses that would maybe help stretch or
Mm-hmm.
strengthen that. Okay. Currently, if someone comes in for back pain, I'm looking at the entire body and I'm looking at every system. I'm going to look at where there are emotional blocks within your body. So the main blocks I see are left hip, usually sexual trauma in the left hip, fear, worry in the diaphragm, liver area, grief that is blocking the heart down so the body goes like this out of protection, the throat area where mainly a lot of women who've been brought up a certain way or married to a certain spouse, they swallow what they cannot say and emotion, everything gets stuck. So this whole front side ends up going like this. And then they have back pain because fluids aren't moving, emotions aren't moving, just the dysfunctional way their body is moving, a vibrational level, all of it. So we look at all of that, move it through somatically, visceral motions, lymphatic. We use all the systems together to help clear and get everything moving so that the body itself heals. So I just help get things moving, and then their body will heal itself and allow it to come to a higher vibration, fluids move better, the nervous system comes down, and that's the base level where we start.
It's fascinating to me. So I'm fascinated by the brain and how our
Mhm.
brain develops as a result of having the traumatic or abusive or adverse experiences that we have. And of course, the younger it starts, it impacts
Mhm.
us in different ways. But that is fascinating to me. It's equally fascinating to me how the body takes
Oh,
all of that on. Because one of the things that I deal with, a couple of things on that. So I've been working with a chiropractic specialization for about 6 or 7 months now called Network Spinal, which is about keeping the energy moving along the spinal column.
sure.
And they're always working on me, not always, but from time to time, they're working on the left hip, right? And that's
Yeah.
the sexual trauma in me that even though I've done so much to heal, and I think this is a reality of what happens to us is that you don't heal those experiences out of you and away from you. It's part of your being, who you are. And I am me today because of what I've experienced in the past. But I think what we're talking about here is not expelling it, but not allowing it to have an impact on the body that we can move past, not allowing it to keep us bound up in any way, whether that's physically or emotionally in our heart, releasing it, the release and letting it go. But the fact that I've experienced what I've experienced is always going to be with me. That's the reality of me. But I don't want to hold it. And so letting that go is what I'm trying to do. I know you want to say something
Well,
about that?
I'm going to preface this with I am not one of the top experts in how the brain works. I
I'm
do
just
study,
fascinated by
right,
it.
right, exactly. I do study and have some studies in applied neurology because I believe the brain is what runs everything.
Yeah,
So
it's our engine. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm just prefacing that with what I'm about to say. I believe that those experiences, yes, will always live in the brain to a degree. I don't think we
Mm.
can, I don't know, I might actually be wrong, but I do believe that they will live as history in the brain
Yeah.
to some point. I do believe we can, and there are a lot of believers that don't, Christian believers that don't believe in this, but I do believe we can clear the energy out
100%.
in that area. Why does sexual trauma come to the left hip? I don't know, but I have hundreds of clients and I can tell you 99% of them are in the left hip. And I can feel it. Like I can feel
Mm.
it by touching, that it shows up differently, a little bit different in different clients. And I guess what I would say is in the body, it can show up as heavy and stuck. The left leg doesn't want to move. It's stuck down. It's almost like a very protective of that area. So that is what we can help the body move through so it
Yeah.
doesn't feel as protective of that area. We can also change some of the neuroplasticity in the brain and change how the body perceives that event. But do I believe that the event will just be forgotten forever? No.
Yeah, I mean, it's just fact.
Right.
And I don't think we should be trying to forget it, right? Because I believe that each of us are here in this lifetime. Our soul is here for an assigned task. We're here on a mission. There's something we're meant to be doing in this lifetime.
Yes.
And for me, I now know that I'm meant to be the healing mentor. That means that I had to go on this amazing healing journey. That means that I had to suffer and then have the need to go on the healing journey. So I can't erase that, and I'm not trying to change it because that's my work in this lifetime. But again, the healing process is about releasing that bind on the body, whether it's the brain, it's the heart, it's physical. That's what we're trying to do, is release those events and the way that those events manifest and live inside of us, the big us. We're trying to release that. And that's
my biggest. So one of my big aha moments was this dream I had with God. And I truly believe that that every one of us is born on purpose and for a purpose.
Yes.
And that when we have these events and they become so overwhelming that we can't live out that purpose anymore, or that we feel like we can't live out that purpose anymore due to our bodies not functioning enough to do that, whether we're just stuck movement wise, grief wise, throat wise, we're not speaking our truth, the grief is heavy. That's what my goal is, to help women to get their bodies to a point where they feel like they can live out their purpose.
Hi, I'd like to invite you to get your free copy of Empowered Survivors, the Healing Quick Start Guide. The guide includes an assessment to help you determine whether you're ready to do the deep, transformational inner work that will set your heart free from any fear-based emotions that you're carrying and lead you to love-based living. Download your copy of the guide at empoweredsurvivors.com/heal.
What do you think about the idea that maybe there are some people here whose purpose is to live with that for their entire life? And when I'm asking you this question, I'm thinking about certain people who I know who have had relationships with that I have moved on past the relationship with them, because it was clear to me at the time when I made that decision that they weren't going to do the work to heal, to be able to have more balanced lives that I could actually be in. I think breaking the codependency that I was adopting by being in those relationships with them, that was a choice that I made for myself, even though they were painful choices. And I look back at those people who are still stuck, and I just wonder, and I think about this with great compassion and empathy and actually some sadness for them. But I agree with you that each of us here is here on this earth with a mission and for a purpose. But I also believe in balance, the yin and the yang, homeostasis, good and bad, light and dark, however you want to talk about it. And so I have to accept the fact that if I want to paint the rosy picture, I'm here for all the good. We're all here for all the good. Probably some of us that are here to be on the weightier side and pain and the suffering. So just I'm curious what you believe about that.
My beliefs on that. From a biblical worldview, I believe that God wants all of us to come to him. And I believe that in that, he wants to give us life here on earth. And so I personally don't believe that he would want us suffering like that. That's just my personal view. But also in the Bible, there was a story of Job who suffered long, and there were reasons for that. So do people suffer in this world that don't get help for a long time? Yeah, I believe that happens. I have great compassion for people like that. I believe that they've been hurt and they might just be having a really hard time coming to healing, because that is how their body is trying to protect itself. That's my scientific side. I have a spiritual and scientific side. So those two together, the scientific side of saying that that's how the body protects itself, and it just can't, it is its homeostasis. right? It is its
Yeah.
way of protecting itself. And I don't know. I think there's a calling that God would not want us all to be suffering. So I don't know. It's a mystery of the universe, I think.
I agree.
I
It
don't
is a
know.
mystery of the universe, and it's a hard one to answer. I think everything you're saying about the people that I'm thinking about when we're having this conversation is true. They've had difficulty in their own life, things that have been done to them, but
Yeah.
their response to that was then to adopt behaviors that are destructive.
Yeah.
Right. And that's part of being a survivor. I've been there. I've done that. And I'm as a survivor, I did things and was living my life in ways that weren't great for periods of time. So I think we all do that as survivors. And by God's grace, I found my way to my healing journey and have been able to move past that. I do think that is perhaps one of the differences, right? Is turning to God for the help and then going on to let God lead you to your purpose, which is what I think I've done. I hope I'm doing. I think it's what you believe you've done and you are doing when you realize that purpose. And, but I wonder, I'm like, is it the human resistance to the spiritual evolution and the growth with God? Or is it, and maybe it's a little both, or is it more this person's purpose is just to suffer in this lifetime, and maybe next lifetime they're going to come back in a form that is going to surrender to God and move on? I don't know. I think you're right. It's one of the great mysteries of the universe, but I was just curious what you thought about that, because I think it's so easy for us to say yes on purpose when we are the person who has made the transformation, right? And that's what mine has been, is a radical personal and professional transformation. And you've had some transformation in your life as well. So it's so easy to say yes to purpose and God's purpose. Why are we here? What are we meant to be doing when we have crossed that plane and we're into that place? I think it's much more difficult when you look at people who are stuck in suffering. And I have to wonder, why is that? And a part of it, I also know that God has created me specifically and you specifically to be that voice of healing and of transformation, and to bring that message to the world that
healing is possible. The body's
a huge, it absolutely it is, but a huge part of that is, for me and what I believe, there's a spiritual element of that.
Yeah.
And every bit of my being, who I am, what I've experienced, what I'm here doing today is entirely in the universe's hands, God's hands. And I genuinely believe that, and I know it to be true. And I know that's what I'm meant to be doing, is telling people about this. That's what you're meant to be doing, is telling people about it so they can get on the train. But maybe there are just people in this world who just will remain, for whatever reason, with their ears closed, hearing that message.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely think there are, but I think even if they don't hear that their body's made to heal, I do think they can still heal some. Even if they don't get that into the heart space, I do think they can heal some along in some way.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
Yes. And I hope that is true for them. And at this moment, I'm saying a quick prayer that God will move that way.
Someone specific in mind.
In their hearts. Some people, yeah. And it's not just, it's a few I'm thinking of. I think it's part of the difficulty of the healing journey that we go on as individuals. We heal and we come into those higher vibrational states. Our energy shifts. We are emanating a different energetic frequency because we've released a lot of that heavy emotion from our body. And what I find is the reality of that is that there's still people in our lives, and maybe there are people who are in an earlier part of our life that we're no longer carrying directly with us. But as our energy shifts, we pull away from them. It's almost, my experience in some cases, it's almost been a repulsion. And I've had this with relationships that were voluntary. Okay, my first marriage, and someone that I dated for a period of time after I left that marriage. Those were voluntary relationships that I entered into, and my energy shifting almost became like repelling magnets where we could not be together anymore. And they're still living in that unhealed space, or those lower energetic states. I also experienced that in that same phenomenon in relationships that I was assigned by being born into this
Oh.
world. And that's parents and siblings are those, right?
Yeah.
And so I experienced that same healed versus unhealed energy, where
Yeah.
literally that's what it feels like to me, is there is like a repulsion to certain family members because my energy is in a different state than
Yeah.
theirs. And that's just the reality of going through the healing journey, is that there are going to be people in our lives that we have to make decisions about. What are we going to do with these? And recognizing that the core of that decision-making process, I think, comes back to where are we in our energetic states? And you have to decide as a human being, what am I going to do with this relationship? I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it all together. I'm going to continue the way it is, or I'm going to put some boundaries around it. Right.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality of what we go through. And as we heal, we're going to face those people. Right. And we have to make those choices. Right.
Yeah.
My hope is that we get them all on the healing pathway. But man, there are people who are resistant to that. Right.
Yes.
They are like, I'm just repulsed by you. And I really would hope that they would gravitate more toward me. But that's when the great mysteries of the universe come back around.
Yeah. And I personally believe that can even be a spiritual issue, right? We have a body, mind, and a spirit. And I even believe a lot of that can be a spiritual issue. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
We live in an energetic and spiritual world. I believe there are spirits that can, how do I say this? I just believe we live in a spiritual world that how do I explain it without being too, I guess the direct thing is I believe that people can be taken over by spirits.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You're by a dark energy. I believe that too. Yeah, I do. And ultimately, that is my question for God.
Yeah.
And this is where I come back to the idea that there's balance in everything. And
I see what you're saying.
Does that mean then, if there are those of us who've moved into a light state, where I am, where you are, does that mean that by definition, then there are people who are in a darker state?
Yeah. We
right?
live.
And that's a hard thing to wrap your head around sometimes for me.
Yeah.
But I do. But
I do believe just as the body can heal, the spirit can be free.
Yes, I think it can be too.
And just like the nervous system and the body can heal, I believe the spirit can be freed in an instant.
I believe that too. Yes. Yeah. That's what I'm doing. That's what you're doing.
So, yeah. Yes. People can be freed of their spiritual baggage or bondage. Yes. Yeah.
So you mentioned women. Do you work primarily with women or only women?
Yes. I would say 99%. I really only work with women. I do every now and then work with men if it's a client's husband or son.
Okay.
But yes, I work with women who have been through, I would say, major life events or chronic pain, stress, burnout, major life events. Yeah.
Yeah. And then working with the men in their lives is about them. I'm assuming not just the men individually, but more about the collective.
When a spouse brings either their husband or their son, it's either been because of pain or stress or massage in general, which I don't do a lot of massages just in general, but that's usually pain. It's usually pain, chronic pain that they're like, I'm okay. Please go get some help for your chronic pain. Or it's a little bit of stress. Those are usually the two.
Yeah. Yeah. And you are living where?
I'm in North Plano. I'm in the North Dallas area, North Plano. My office is in North Plano too.
So everyone listening to this who's in the Dallas area can get to you directly if they would like to work with you or meet you, spend some time with you.
Yeah.
And then people who are not in the area, do you know people similar to yourself in other parts of Texas or other parts of the country?
I don't. But what I normally tell people is they can look at, it's called the Baral Institute, and look for a practitioner that's, excuse me, Baral trained, they would be similar. I wouldn't say they do exactly what I would do, but they would have a lot of expertise in that.
But it's a great place to start.
It's a good place to start. Yes.
Yeah, very good. All right. And tell folks how they can find you on the internet and social media.
My website is magnoliawellnesstx.com. And my Instagram is the same, Magnolia Wellness TX on Instagram.
All right. And we are going to link all of that. The Baral Institute and Magnolia Wellness TX will link it into the show notes. So folks will be able to connect with you directly if they would like to do that.
Great.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. It's been great having you on today. It was a fun conversation.
Yes. Great conversation.
Philosophical there.
Right.
But good.
That's great. Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah. Great conversation. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to have had you.
Thank you, Beth, for having me.
All right, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Healing mind, body, and spirit. That's what we've been talking about today. And if you'd like to connect with Cynthia to learn more, you can find her through the show notes. I hope you will. And as I always tell you, please keep healing. I hope you have enjoyed today's episode of Let's Heal with Beth Jones. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel at Beth Jones Healing Mentor. And if you'd like to know more about me and my work to help other survivors to heal, please visit me on the web at empoweredsurvivors.com.